You have read the checklists. You have watched the videos. You have scrolled through the forums late at night, wondering if you are just overthinking things. But what if the signs you are looking for are not the signs that actually matter? When we think of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a very specific image usually pops into our heads. It is the young boy who cannot sit still in class, who interrupts the teacher, who climbs on the furniture, and who acts before he thinks. We have been culturally and medically trained to look for disruption. But what happens when the disruption is entirely internal? For millions of girls with ADHD, the signals are quieter, subtler, and far too often completely missed by parents, teachers, and even pediatricians. Today, we are going to reveal what parents actually see when they look closely, what the medical community has been overlooking for decades, and how you can finally understand the beautiful, complex, and often exhausting way your daughter's brain is wired. To understand why girls are slipping through the cracks, we first have to understand how our current diagnostic criteria were built. For a very long time, almost all clinical research on ADHD was conducted on young, hyperactive boys. The screening tools, the behavioral checklists, and the baseline expectations were all designed around how ADHD presents in males. Because of this, we created a massive blind spot. Boys with ADHD tend to externalize their symptoms. Their struggles are visible, loud, and often disruptive to the people around them. Girls, on the other hand, are far more likely to internalize their symptoms. Their struggles are quiet, hidden, and often disruptive only to themselves. When a boy is bouncing off the walls, the teacher notices. When a girl is staring out the window, lost in a complex daydream, or quietly doodling to keep her brain stimulated, the teacher just sees a quiet, well-behaved student who might be a little spacey. This difference in presentation means that boys are often diagnosed in elementary school, while girls are frequently not diagnosed until middle school, high school, or even well into adulthood. And this delay is not just a matter of missing a label. It is a matter of missing crucial support during the most formative years of a child's psychological development. When a girl goes years without understanding why she struggles with things that seem so easy for her peers, she does not conclude that her brain is wired differently. She concludes that she is broken. She internalizes the feedback she receives. She hears that she is lazy, careless, not living up to her potential, or just too sensitive. By the time she is finally evaluated, the primary issue is often no longer just the ADHD itself, but the severe anxiety, depression, and deeply rooted shame that have grown around it. Understanding this historical bias is the first step in taking off the blinders and seeing your daughter for who she truly is. Let us break down the actual mechanics of what is happening inside her brain, starting with executive function. You can think of executive function as the brain's management system, the internal coordinator that handles planning, organizing, prioritizing, and switching between tasks. In a neurotypical brain, this coordinator sends out clear instructions, and the brain gets to work. In an ADHD brain, the coordinator is often overwhelmed, or perhaps there are 5 different voices shouting conflicting instructions at the same time. For girls, this executive dysfunction rarely looks like a refusal to do work. It looks like paralysis. You might see your daughter sitting at her desk with her homework spread out in front of her, completely frozen. She wants to do the work. She knows she needs to do the work, but she literally cannot figure out which step to take first. This is a failure of task initiation, a core component of executive dysfunction. Then there is working memory, the brain's ability to hold on to information just long enough to use it. If you give your daughter a 3-step instruction like go upstairs, grab your shoes, and bring down your backpack, she might go upstairs, see a book, start reading it, and completely forget why she went up there in the first place. It is not that she is ignoring you. Her working memory simply dropped the information before she could execute it. Furthermore, we need to talk about the inattentive presentation. This is the most common presentation in girls, and it is widely misunderstood. Inattention does not mean a lack of attention. It actually means an inability to regulate attention. A girl with inattentive ADHD can focus intensely on something she finds deeply interesting, a state known as hyperfocus, but she physically cannot force her brain to engage with tasks that do not provide immediate stimulation. When she is sitting in class zoning out, her brain is not turned off. It is actually understimulated, desperately searching for internal engagement because the external environment is not providing enough dopamine to keep her neural networks active. Now we have to look at a component of ADHD that modern neuroscience recognizes as absolutely central to the condition, especially in girls. That is emotional dysregulation. ADHD is not just an attention disorder. It is a performance and regulation disorder. The same neural pathways that struggle to regulate focus also struggle to regulate emotions. For a girl with ADHD, feelings are not just experienced. They are felt at a massive, overwhelming volume. A minor disappointment, like a friend not sitting next to her at lunch, or a slightly critical comment from a teacher, can trigger an intense emotional cascade. This is closely tied to something called rejection-sensitive dysphoria. This is an extreme emotional sensitivity and pain, triggered by the perception that a person has been rejected, teased, or criticized by important people in their life. For a young girl whose social standing and peer acceptance are developmentally paramount, this sensitivity can be utterly debilitating. It makes her hypervigilant, constantly scanning the room for microexpressions or shifts in tone that might indicate someone is mad at her. And this brings us to the most exhausting part of being a girl with ADHD, which is social masking, also known as camouflaging. From a very young age, girls are heavily socialized to be compliant, polite, organized, and socially harmonious. The social penalties for girls who break these rules are much harsher than they are for boys. So, what does a smart, observant girl with ADHD do? She learns to hide her symptoms. She forces herself to make eye contact even when it is uncomfortable. She obsessively checks her planner to make sure she does not forget anything. She suppresses her physical restlessness, keeping her hands perfectly still even though her brain is screaming at her to move. She smiles and nods when she is completely lost in a conversation. This masking is incredibly effective at fooling teachers and even parents. She gets good grades, she has friends, she does not cause trouble. But the cognitive load required to maintain this mask all day long is astronomical. It requires a massive amount of conscious, manual effort to do things that neurotypical people do automatically. This is why you might see the phenomenon known as after-school restraint collapse. She holds it together perfectly for 7 hours at school, burning through all her executive function and emotional regulation reserves. The second she walks through the front door of her home, her safe space, the mask drops. The reserves are empty, and she completely falls apart over something seemingly trivial, like the wrong color cup being used for her snack. She is not giving you a hard time. She is having a hard time. She is experiencing the neurological equivalent of a system crash after running a high-demand program all day. So, what do you do with all of this information? How do you move from understanding the hidden mechanics to actually supporting your daughter in her daily life? The first step is to change how you observe and document her behavior. Stop looking for the loud, disruptive signs and start looking for the hidden friction. Keep a low-pressure journal for a couple of weeks. Notice the transition difficulties. Does it take her an unusually long time to shift from playing to eating dinner? Notice the emotional volatility. Are her emotional reactions consistently disproportionate to the trigger? And does she struggle to return to baseline? Notice the exhaustion. Is she completely drained after social events or school days in a way that her peers do not seem to be? When you eventually speak to a pediatrician, a child psychologist, or an educational specialist, bring this specific, nuanced data. Do not just say she is easily distracted. Say she experiences task paralysis when faced with multi-step instructions. Do not just say she is moody. Describe the intense emotional dysregulation and the after-school collapse. Using the precise vocabulary of executive function and emotional regulation will completely change the way medical and educational professionals evaluate her. The second crucial step is to change the narrative inside your own home. The language you use to describe her brain matters immensely. She has likely spent years absorbing the message that she is lazy or careless. You need to actively dismantle that shame. Explain to her, in age-appropriate terms, how her brain works. Tell her that her brain is like a race car engine with bicycle brakes. It is incredibly powerful, creative, and fast, but it just needs a little help learning how to steer and stop. Frame her traits as strengths that just need the right environment. Her ability to hyper-focus is a superpower when applied to her passions. Her deep empathy and emotional intensity make her a fiercely loyal and compassionate friend. Her divergent thinking means she will solve problems in ways other people cannot even imagine. The third step is to adjust her environment to reduce the cognitive load, rather than just demanding that she try harder. Willpower is a finite resource, and her tank is already depleted from masking all day. Create external scaffolding for her executive function. Use visual timers so she can physically see time passing, rather than relying on her internal clock, which is often impaired in ADHD. Break large, overwhelming tasks into micro-steps. Instead of telling her to clean her room, which requires massive planning and organizing, tell her to put all the blue toys in the bin. Body doubling is another highly effective strategy. Simply sitting in the same room with her, quietly doing your own work while she does hers, provides an external anchor that helps her brain stay on task. And finally, build in mandatory guilt-free downtime. Her brain needs time to unmask, to process the sensory input of the day, and to recharge its dopamine reserves. The fourth and perhaps most important step is to advocate for her at school. If she qualifies for educational accommodations, do not settle for generic solutions. Push for the specific supports that address her hidden struggles. Request that teachers give her instructions one step at a time, or provide them in writing. Ask for a designated, quiet space she can go to when she feels sensory or emotional overload coming on, before she reaches the point of a meltdown. Request that she be allowed to use subtle fidget tools, or take movement breaks, without having to ask for permission, which removes the social stigma and the executive function tax of having to advocate for herself in the moment. Here is the ultimate truth that every parent of a neurodivergent child needs to hear. Noticing these subtle signs is not about slapping a medical label on your daughter. It is about giving her the lens through which she can finally understand herself. When we see our daughters clearly, not through the outdated, male-centric checklists of the past, but through the reality of their unique neurological wiring, we change the entire trajectory of their lives. We replace shame with strategy. We replace frustration with self-compassion. We give them the tools to harness the incredible, vibrant, and creative power of their minds, rather than spending all their energy trying to hide it. Your daughter is not a broken version of a neurotypical child. She is a perfectly wired ADHD mind, and with your understanding and support, she is going to do absolutely remarkable things. If this deep dive helped you see your child in a new light, or if it finally validated that gut feeling you have had for years, please hit the subscribe button. We are building a comprehensive, science-backed, and deeply empathetic library of explanations for the developmental and psychological questions that keep parents awake at night. In our next video, we are going to explore the fascinating neuroscience of tantrums, what is actually happening in the developing brain during a meltdown, and why the traditional advice of just letting them cry completely misses the biological reality of emotional regulation. Thank you so much for watching, for caring enough to look deeper, and for being the advocate your child needs.